The Simpsons.
The Simpsons is one of the most iconic TV series of all time. In fact, ask anyone on the planet what they know about the series, and the majority of them will start reeling off names of characters or their famous catchphrases. In fact, I'd say it's nigh on impossible to meet anybody who hasn't watched a single episode from this planet. And judging by that previous comment, if you did meet someone, it's probably an alien infiltration unit who is a precursor for the first wave of an alien invasion. Yep, that's where my mind went. So the show first aired in 1989, and as of making this video, there are currently 706 episodes. And considering that the episodes have an average runtime of 22 minutes, if you decided to sit down now and watch every single episode back to back, you would be sat in your seat for nearly 11 days. And that's not even considering the films. In short, if you did sit there and watch all the episodes back to back and didn't take a rest or a break, you wouldn't survive. But anyway, mathematical segue over. Now, it's only logical that such an iconic TV series would produce games, and one of the best of these Simpsons games is The Simpsons Hit and Run. Hello everybody, I'm Roy McCoy, and welcome to the latest episode of What Happened To, the videos in which we take a game and or series from history that has seemingly disappeared and ask those all-important questions. What was it? What happened to it? And could we ever see another one? And before we get started, don't forget to smash that like button, as it really does help it to grow. And if you enjoy these gaming history videos, please consider subscribing. But after that shameless plug, let's move on to talk about everything we know about The Simpsons Hit and Run. Before we start talking about Hit and Run, we need a little bit of backstory. We need to talk about The Simpsons road rage. So our story begins in the year 2001, when The Simpsons Road Rage was developed by Radical Entertainment and published by EA. A company that I realised during the making of this video that if you pronounce it a little bit funny, it sounds like you're vomiting. Anyway, Simpsons Road Rage hit the Xbox, PlayStation 2 and Nintendo GameCube in 2001, and there was also a Game Boy Advance version, yep, that's how long ago we're talking, developed by Ultron and published by THQ. However, the focus of this video will be firmly on Radical Entertainment's offering. The game in total took around 11 months to develop. Radical Entertainment had won the license to base a game on the series, as they had some pretty lofty aspirations for what they wanted to make. They basically wanted to create a huge open world environment of Springfield with iconic locations and lots of fan service. Sounds great, right? And on top of that, to provide a little bit more authenticity for the game, the cast members of The Simpsons provided their voices for the games. As I said, this on paper sounds great. However, all was not too rosy for Simpsons Road Rage. The Simpsons Road Rage had a problem, and it was due to the limitations of technology at the time. Apparently, towards the end of development, it was necessary for the game to be quickly redeveloped and tinkered with, as the open world that had worked ever so well on the development PlayStation 2s didn't run smoothly on the retail PlayStation 2s, which means that that vision of a vast open world had to be divided into 6 individual maps. Now, if you're playing the game, quite often you'll notice these divisions between the areas because they were quite crudely coded in towards the end of development. To block off the different areas, you had things like car pileups and rubbish heaps to block you from going from one area to another. The final version of the game saw you driving around Springfield, picking up passengers and delivering them to other areas. You needed to do this because Mr. Burns had turned all of Springfield bosses into nuclear-powered ones that were wreaking havoc and were causing chaos around Springfield. Therefore, the citizens of Springfield had to earn money by acting as taxis to move famous characters from one destination to another in the hope of earning $1 million to buy back the buses, and that is the basic plot of the game. And if you found yourself thinking, well, that sounds a little bit like Crazy Taxi, well, you wouldn't be alone, because that's exactly what Sega thought. And 2 years after this game was released in 2003, Sega filed a lawsuit against EA, Radical Entertainment and Fox Interactive. They claimed that The Simpsons Road Rage had effectively copied Sega's Crazy Taxi. Now, the case was actually settled outside of court as a result of private mediation. However, this wasn't the only hit that Simpsons Road Rage took, as even though the game sold pretty well, selling 1.6 million copies, the reviews weren't exactly stellar, with most of them being quite average, and the Metacritic score as of making this video stands at 64 on the PS2 and a low of 55 on the Game Boy Advance. The majority of reviewers said that the game suffered from a number of problems such as clipping invisible walls, control issues, lack of depth in the game, and some frame rate issues, which actually probably would have been infinitesimally worse had the developer continued with their idea of a completely open world. So that brings us all in all to say that The Simpsons Road Rage was a pretty disappointing game. But as you know from the title of this video, we're not talking about Road Rage, we're talking about Hit and Run, which is arguably one of the greatest Simpsons games ever made. Once again, it was developed by Radical Entertainment. Radical Entertainment clearly felt that they could do better, that Road Rage hadn't perfectly encapsulated their vision, and so they set out making a bigger and better game. In fact, initially it was designed as a sequel, and initially the project had the codename Simpsons Road Rage 2. The making of this game was seen as a chance by the developer to realise their initial dreams of that kind of open world environment. And at some point they decided to change the name away from Road Rage to Hit and Run, probably to distance themselves from that former title that was a little bit meh. Now, as I said earlier, if you thought that Road Rage shared a lot with Crazy Taxi, there was a huge amount of comparisons between Hit and Run and Grand Theft Auto 3, which is awesome. What is Hit and Run? Well, released in 2003, it's an action-adventure game that incorporates RPG mechanics and is primarily focused on the driving aspects of the game. However, this time, unlike Road Rage, there are chances for you to walk around on foot, and there are some simple attack mechanics such as a punch and a kick, and there are lots of fan-favourite locations and homages to the show, and it was written and voiced by the characters and staff of the actual TV series. This is the 22nd Simpsons game, and it is arguably my favourite and the best. And the things that made people compare it to GTA was its level design, its driving, and its UI with things like a radar system. The plot this time focused on the release of a new Buzz Cola that seemed to be creating havoc with the citizens of Springfield. When Homer and Bart notice strange activities around Springfield, it doesn't take them too long before they realise that Kang and Kodos, those aliens that are always plotting at something, were responsible for a cunning plan to make the people go insane by contaminating Springfield's water with the new Buzz Cola, which also had the ability to raise the dead and create zombies. How good does that sound? The game contains several levels and you were able to play as a number of your favourite characters, mainly the Simpsons family except for Maggie. As I said, while Hit and Run did focus on driving, you were also able to walk around on foot and explore the environment, entering some of those iconic locations like Apu's shop. The game's 7 levels were vast and had a kind of sandbox feel to the missions and subplots. This game, in short, was brilliant. It had so much fan service, as I mentioned, with iconic locations and Easter eggs. And on top of that, you could also find some secret cars that you could drive around in. Now, in terms of development, the game was slightly delayed, needing a few more months for Radical Entertainment felt the game that was the redemption of Road Rage. Once again, the cast of the TV show provided the voices, and the story and dialogue was written by the series writers, which gave the game an even more authentic feel. And I have to say, this is one of my favourite games of my youth, and I would really like to see it remade or remastered. It was so much fun and so interesting to play, and I loved it. And I wasn't the only one, because when the game released in 2003, it was developed, as I say, by Radical Entertainment, published by Vivendi Universal Games, and launched on the GameCube, PlayStation 2, Xbox, and on the PC. The game received good reviews, and it currently has a Metacritic score of 78 on the PlayStation 2, with a high of 82 on the PC. And as I said, this one was like Grand Theft Auto, but most of the critics compared it favourably to GTA 3, seeing it as a kind of parody of those series of games. A lot of people said the game was fun and enjoyable and humorous, and I completely agree. However, there were some issues regarding bugs and glitches, including a few camera problems. However, all in all, the game was well received by critics, and not only that, it also sold well, with some people saying it sold as high as 4 million copies. So that was the development history of Hit and Run. So the question has to be now, why did we never see another one? Where is that Hit and Run 2? Well, apparently at some point a sequel called Hit and Run 2 was in the works, and they had already been talking about it at a pre-production level, with various ideas floating around, including a medieval setting, which could have proven interesting. However, that dream came to a sudden end, mainly during the negotiations for the furthering of the rights. You see, the big turning point for Radical Entertainment and the furtherment of this series is that in 2005, based on the success that Radical Entertainment had had with games like Hit and Run, their publisher, Vivendi Universal Games, decided to purchase the studio. And in 2005, Radical Entertainment became a subsidiary of Vivendi Games. It was around this time that the rights for the Simpsons games came up for auction once more, and several management figures apparently decided that Vivendi should walk away and that the risk was too high, considering the expense of both the game development and the rights to go ahead. Now, the deal that was on the table had the possibility of 4 more games to be made in the Simpsons world, but it's also interesting to notice that at the time, Vivendi also had the rights to some Marvel games, which meant that they felt there was enough for their developers to be moving on to without needing to splurge out on some more rights. And considering that they lost the rights and Radical Entertainment became a subsidiary of Vivendi, those initial plans for Simpsons Hit and Run 2 would never come to fruition. And who bought those rights in 2005? None other than EA. And to be honest, if you know what happened to things like the LucasArts games and the Star Wars franchise, you're pretty aware of what happened to the Simpsons games. Now, in 2007, they did release their own Simpsons game called The Simpsons Game, which, on an interesting side note, was developed by EA Redwood Shores. And if that name rings a bell, they are the studio that later became Visceral Games, those ones famous for bringing us Dead Space. Yes, the makers of Dead Space also made a Simpsons game. And it was a pretty decent effort, but sadly, it didn't sell overly well, and in the 14 years since then, there have been 4 other games released by EA, all of which have been mobile games. Oh god. And the last one of those was called Tapped Out and released in 2012 and also appeared in 2013 on the Kindle. Yes, on the Kindle. And that is pretty much the last Simpsons game to this day. Since then, Vivendi have merged with Activision Blizzard, and Radical Entertainment became a subsidiary of Activision. They went on to work on a number of games, including the prototype games, which will no doubt appear in another episode of my What Happened To videos, and their last offering came in the form of a support team for Bungie during their development of Destiny in 2014. That is when Radical Entertainment was shut down. That all sounds pretty bleak. So the question we have to ask now is, could we ever see another one? Well, a few months ago I would have been pretty negative and straight out said we'll probably never see another hit and run game. However, over the last few months there have been some interesting developments that gives me some cautious level of optimism. Now, we do have to acknowledge the fact that Radical Entertainment are indeed gone, so whoever would be working on this game hypothetically would not be that studio. However, first of all, we need to talk about EA. Now, we know that they purchased the rights in 2005, but to be honest, at the moment it's a little bit hazy as to where the Simpsons rights lie. Now, they haven't done anything with the franchise since 2013. It's possible that they're sitting on the rights, or it's also possible that they have defaulted back. But let's talk hypothetically if EA do own the rights still. Now, as I say, a few months ago it would have been pretty bleak. However, earlier on this year, EA did take a knock, because for so long they were the sole owners of the rights to the Star Wars franchise, Star Wars of course owned by Disney, yet in the last year we got the news that other developers will be having a go at Star Wars games. And that could have possibly been quite a big hit to EA. Now, if they do own the Simpsons rights, it's probably one of those franchises that they would like to make the most of. Because EA is a big company, and like all big developers, if they can smell a profit, they would like to turn one. And as for a remake or remaster of Hit and Run, well, you can tell they're not opposed to making a remake or a remaster, bringing back things like Command & Conquer, and the recent announcement that Dead Space was making a reappearance. And I'm still on the fence whether I'm looking forward to that or not. Please, EA, do a good job. But therefore, if EA still own the rights, they are likely to want to exploit that. And what about a specific remake of Hit and Run, or a Hit and Run 2? Well, again, it's not entirely clear where those rights to that specific property went. Whether they were held by the holding company of the Simpsons rights, whether they went to EA, or whether they stuck with Vivendi before they merged with Activision Blizzard. If the last one happened, it's probably not going to happen. But that's all a bit hypothetical. Now, an interesting fact is that the Simpsons rights, much like Star Wars rights, are owned by Disney, and looking at what happened to the Star Wars rights with them being offered out to other publishers and developers, the same thing could soon happen to the Simpsons rights, depending on the contract that EA signed and whether or not it has expired. Either way, whether the rights are back with Disney ready to be dished out once more, or they're held by EA, I have a funny feeling that we could be seeing a Simpsons game pretty soon, much sooner than we previously imagined. I imagine that losing exclusivity on the Star Wars rights probably did rock EA, and if they don't hold them, then they'll probably be dished out anyway. Either way, I think we've got a Simpsons game coming soon. It may not be the Hit and Run remake or remaster, although if Disney owned the rights, yes, it could happen, but I could see something coming along soon that's very much a spiritual successor. And if EA, Disney, or whoever own the rights these days need to look if there's interest in the game, all they need to do is look at Reubs Ward, who's a YouTuber who put onto YouTube an incredible and beautiful remake. It looked absolutely stunning, and you can see how beautiful the game could look with modern technology. That video went live on the 15th of August, and in the last 9 days, it's already got 1.9 million views. EA, Disney, whoever's got those rights, if you are looking for proof that this game would sell, look no further than Reubs. I'll put a link to this video in the description below. So personally, I hope that this is coming back, and I'm going to be dusting off my copy of this brilliant old game to give it an outing because I want to play it. So I'm kind of hopeful, but a little bit cautious on this one. Let me know in the comments below if you think this game could be coming back, and any other games that you'd like to see covered in my What Happened To series. And if you haven't done already, please do consider subscribing, as it really helps my channel. But from me today, all it leaves me to do today is say thank you very much for watching, and this is Roy McCoy, out.